This story is about India 2030 and how tech entrepreneurs, all of you in the room, are going to make us a $10 trillion economy. We are ready to take our place in the formal economy as among the top 5 in the world. We are already top 3 in PPP, but in terms of the current value of the GDP will be among the top 5 by 2030. Next. India at a glance, just look at this data. Population is 1.31 billion, we're growing at 1.3%. The whole of South India's fertility rate is 1.7, below the replacement rate. So population is no longer a problem. And our GDP is growing very well, is $2.25 trillion. Per capita income is $1,700. PPP is $8.8 trillion. It is a large economy. And if you look at the growth rates, it has been very, very good for the last many years. Next. Now look at 2017 to 1991. You'll all be surprised to know that India's GDP grew from $275 billion to $2.25 trillion between 1991 to 2017, a CAGR of 8.5% in dollars. 8.5% in dollars CAGR for 26 years. Show me one economy which has done this for 26 years. China did it. But nobody else has done it in world history for 26 years at 8.5%. In nominal terms, including inflation, we grew at about 13.8%. Our savings rate has grown. World trade has grown for us as a part of our market share. Our savings rate has grown. We got a savings rate of around 30%, investment of 32%. And if you look at every indicator, this economy is rocking and has grown consistently for 26 years. Next. Look at India's GDP growth. We've grown at 9.5% in the earlier regime, except it was accompanied by high borrowings and high inflation. Now we have sustainable growth, and the stage is set to grow at 8.5, 9% over the next 10, 15 years. Next. We are where China was about in 2004. So we are 12 years behind China in terms of GDP growth. So we have a model. Of course, we can't grow like China at the cost of sustainability. We need to have a different model. But China grew at 9.9% a year from 1978 till 2011 till 2014. And that shows large economies can grow. If 40% of the world grows at 8.5% average, you can imagine what is going to happen to this world. Next. The world is changing. The GDP today is about $77 trillion. The OECD is ahead of the rest of the world. By 2021, we'll see a role reversal where the emerging markets, including China and India, will have a share of GDP larger than the OECD. It takes us back to 1820, 1825, when China and India made up 45% of world GDP. So by 2021, after 200 years, we're going to see the rise of the emerging markets led by Asia, and they're going to have a larger share than the developed world. The developed world will have a stock of wealth and capital for some more time, but if you go forward to 2031, you'll see that the emerging markets will have a larger part of the world GDP. The US could grow at 2.5% a year over the next 10 years, is the peak. Maybe Europe at 1.5, Japan at 1, China could go at 5.5, India at 8.5, rest of the world maybe at 6. But world growth could be 4% or 4.5. Even if it comes down to 3.5%, the emerging markets outside the OECD are the growth drivers. Next. India and China at a glance. China opened up in 1978, we opened up in 1991. China's GDP is $12.25 trillion, we are $2.27 trillion. China has a per capita income of $8,500, we are $1,700. China is the exporter of the world, importer of the world, largest amount of reserves, and China's GDP will be the largest in the world in PPP, even now at $21 trillion. But it shows us what we can do if we get our act right. Next. India's biggest problem has been the fiscal condition, where you spend 2.9% of GDP on subsidies. Because of the NDA government, we are now spending 1.9, is very focused, and with DBT, the percentage may come down, but the efficiency goes up. So the robbery that is happening in the system is coming down, and this is one of the best reforms that's ever happened, where there's targeted benefits going on. And the extra 1% of GDP saved by subsidies means an extra spending of 1,50,000 crores, which is enormous. Next. India has a strong industrial base, 125 million tons of steel, which is on the ground right now. Some of them are sick, they'll come back. And we are the second largest in the world behind China. China is 750 million. And if you look at other indicators, cement, we are 370 million. China is about 2.2 billion. And if you look at mobile phones, we have about 1.1 billion. China, of course, has got $1 billion. So if you look at India, Japan, and the United States. We are right there in terms of many indicators. We make 20 million two-wheelers, 3.5 million four-wheelers. United States makes about 17, Japan makes about 4.8. So this is a major economy. It's a real economy and a major economy with much lower prices. Next. We have a young population. Average age will be 29 years by 2020. And Europe is about 45, Japan is about 48, China is 31, the United States is 31. It means that we have a young consuming class for the next 15, 20 years, at least going on till 2050. We are the youngest country in the world with a sizable population. Next. India will continue to have a young population. You can see the working age population there. 65% of the population, the working age of 16 to 61. Next. Higher education infrastructure is pretty good. We have 800 universities, 51,000 colleges, 35 million young people in college. Very soon we're going to overtake China. China is around 35, 36. That means 80 lakh youngsters graduate or come out of colleges every single year. And if you look at the professional courses, we produce possibly the largest number of professionals. Many of them may not be of good quality. It doesn't matter. But anyway, the capacity is very, very huge. 50,000 doctors have come out every year. Maybe 300,000 lawyers, MBAs are plenty. So we'll have a highly educated base. The problem is quality, but the support base will be very large. So we have a very large educational infrastructure. By 2030, there'll be 70 million young people in college. It's growing by 3.5% a year. It will be the largest number of people in college in any single civilization, any single country ever in human history, because China has peaked out. Next. India has adequate savings and investments. Our investment to GDP came down after the boom and bust in the previous era, and now we're seeing savings stabilize. We're seeing consumption go up. 70% of GDP is consumption, 30% of GDP is investment. In China, consumption is about 45%, and 55% is capital. So China stops spending capital, growth will come down. We are much more balanced, with 70% being consumption, 30% being investment. Maybe it should be 65-35, but we're doing fairly well. Next. GDP by sector. Our services sector is much higher than China. Our manufacturing is around 26%, China is 40%, but China has become the factory of the world. It shows that we have to shift people from agriculture into industry and services. We have about 45% of the population depend upon 18% of GDP, which is agriculture, which grows at 3%. And we have 55% of the population which depends on 82% of GDP, which is growing at 10%. So we're growing at 7.58%. So divergence between people in the land and people in service industry is a major challenge for India. In the last 15 years, we would have taken 150 million people from the land into industry and services. China has taken 300 million people. So we have to take people from the land, from agriculture into services and give them sustainable livelihoods. But we are changing. About 10 years back, people on the land were about 62%. Next. Infrastructure, we have to spend about 6.7% of GDP. We are spending 4.5%. China has to spend 6.9%. China is spending 8.9%. So we are underspending on infrastructure. Except the last 2 years, more spending is going up. I think in the budget this year, we have 3,35,000 odd crores on infrastructure, which is pretty good. Next. Infrastructure, another slide for you. Next. The startup ecosystem will help create a $10 trillion economy by 2030. Why are we optimistic? Next. The Indian startup system, it has grown by 270%. We got 26,000 startups. That's the data given by Shraddha, which is quietly old. She's not sending me the new data. We are the second largest startup ecosystem in the world. NASSCOM says 5,000 is not correct. Shraddha has got all the names. Most of them are still alive, and I'll go by that. So we have a large startup ecosystem. Every year, 6,500, 7,000 startups come up, 1,200 get funded. And this funding is enormous, as we'll see from now. They created $90 billion of value. Maybe GV can tell me whether the value is much more. I think it should be 95, something like that. But we have created this kind of value. Next. Next. So Indian startups, you can see in Indian startups, Bangalore dominates. Then Delhi, the NCR region is coming up, Mumbai. These make up maybe 80-90% of the total startups. But they are across all sectors. Next. Now, this is an important slide. India has $175 billion of revenue from IT. A poor country with $1,700 per capita has $175 billion from IT, not heard of anywhere in the world. The IT service industry will export this year, 2018, about $121 billion. Last year is $115 billion. And 60% of outsourcing comes to India. And we have 4.25 million people employed in this industry. We are the second largest in the world after the United States in terms of services. This $120 billion has a street value of $200 billion. The world spends $1 trillion on software, out of which $200 billion is delivered from India. And among the top 10 software service companies in the world by market value, 5 are Indian. Of the top 5, 3 are Indian. Of the 2 million employees in the software service industry in the top 10, 1.5 million are Indian. No industry dominates the world like the software service industry of India. And for all these companies from India, not more than 5% of revenues come out of India. So $121 billion this year, only 5% out of India, globally dominant. There's no industry like that anywhere in services. It's an extraordinary story. On top of that, we are seeing these entrepreneurs come up. And this industry spends $2 billion a year on training its people. AI, ML, all the stuff is here. We were in the US minister, and we went and visited Tesla, NVIDIA, Facebook, Google, and IBM Watson. And we spoke to them, and we read this article about AI and ML being dominated by the United States and China, except we found that 35% of the staff in all these companies doing AI is Indian. So India may not be there, but in American companies, we clearly are there as the people are doing AI and ML. Next. So we think by 2025, there'll be 100,000 startups in India, $500 billion of value. We want to say $1 trillion of value, but the stock market today is $2.25 trillion. It may go by 2025 to maybe $5 to $6 trillion. And Vikram is working very hard to make it happen by providing liquidity. And if that happens, we want $1 trillion of listing to happen. But $1 trillion is scary for everybody, so we put 500 million there. And they will employ 3.25 million people. Right now, 400,000 people are employed, and startups create 100 to 125,000 jobs right now this year. If you count all of them, and Shraddha, you must get her the information, and this is fantastic. This is the other city landscape. Next. And let me tell you, if you look at the city landscape, Patna has got startups. We had a hackathon in Udaipur just 2 days ago with Vasundhara Raje. There were 1,900 registrations, 1,800 came, 450 were there, and the first place won by a team by a person from Patna. I stood up and asked him, are you from Patna? He said, Patna, yes. I said, where is Patna? Patna. Everywhere young people are getting into startups and changing India. And they're going to solve India's problems. We in the IT service industry solve JP Morgan's problem, BT's problem, Bank of America, but they're solving India's problem. Problems in education, in health, in supply chain, in manufacturing, in e-commerce, and everything else. Next. Distribution of startup by sector is well spread out. Next. Companies that's cost $1 billion, we put Baiju. Well, we have some information maybe. But we have so many unicorns there. But sadly, barring 1 or 2, all of them are headquartered outside. We have the real fear of becoming a digital colony because Google owns us, Facebook owns us, Twitter owns us, and our best companies are all headquartered outside because investors, some of whom in the room think they can get listing. You go to Singapore, you can't get a listing there. You got to do an ADR. And if you do an ADR, SEC will go after you. When I left Infi, I made sure that I finished all my SEC filings, and before we went and listed NASDAQ, we made sure there's no extradition treaty between the US and India. If the SEC goes after you, it's scary. But capital is available here. You see B2C valuations. B2C valuations are pretty good. You know all this stuff. Next. Even in B2B, the top 30 companies are $10 billion and growing. This data is 1 year old. Next. Startup valuations, a part of the market cap of markets is less compared to the NASDAQ, and I'm sure Vikram and his team are going to take it up, and there's huge scope. In the top 10 companies in the world by market capitalization, 7 to 8 are tech companies. Next. There have been good startups. This is Shraddha's slide. Next. Successful Indian startup exits, very many of them. Small exits, we need big exits. We need the blockbuster exits. Today I read that Paytm and Flipkart are given $2.7 billion. We want Masa to use $25, $30 billion of his $93 billion funds for buying us out and releasing capital. Next. Digital. The biggest revolution in the world is happening in Bharat, in rural India, where the ordinary Indian is using digital to improve the quality of their lives. Next. So what will the future be? Next. The future is going to be determined by 3 things: the smartphone penetration, the India stack, and the startup ecosystem. Next. The India stack. The India stack is the best piece of software ever created in the world, which is disruptive, created by volunteers from Bangalore. It has a consent layer, it has a paperless layer, it has a payment layer, and different layers are in operations as it is right now. And the impact of this is going to be tremendous because it's going to reduce the cost of doing business. There are two things that make an economy competitive: labor productivity, capital productivity. And labor productivity comes by technology. We have only 20% of the productivity of an average German or maybe an American. We have to take it up. And capital productivity, we are pretty good, but we still have to accelerate by increasing ROI. And the India stack will reduce the cost of doing business and put everybody in this country into the formal financial markets. Next. Look at this. There is no incidence in the world where in 5 years you take gone for any large database from 1 to billion. Of course, there are only 2 countries with a billion population, so nobody else can follow. They can't produce so many children in the next 10 years. But look at this. This is an extraordinary story. And the Aadhaar database is very secure. We got all these leftist malcontents saying security breach. It's only because some government put up the Aadhaar numbers on the web. They say there's a breach. There is no breach, that so far as we know. Next. And look at this evolution of the India stack. Next. You see that in the last 3 years, the number of bank accounts by JAM has gone up by 300 million. We got 1.1 billion bank accounts today. Most Indians have a bank account. We've seen the cell phones go up to about 1.1 billion. Bank accounts have gone up. We've seen Aadhaar go up to about 1.19 billion. Now we are in the billion club. We are a billion people. We're already in the billion club. Next. And regulatory acceleration has been there. In the last 21 months, the last 3 months, we got 21 banks. This is an old data. And the banking sector is not open. The payment banks are available. They're mostly available on tap. And we're going to see Paytm spend 15, 20,000 crores. Hopefully, they'll make a loss of 10, 12,000 crores to grow their accounts to about 500. Masa is going to provide them an unlimited line of credit. We're going to have fun. Next. So look at this data. We must believe in this country. 200 million bank accounts in 3 years, which minister has done. When he was there, it was done. It's extraordinary. The total population of US is 315 million. The US has 45 million people without bank accounts. And these numbers cannot be reached by anybody in such a short period of time. The Indian techie and the Indian government and policymakers have done that. Next. And this is something that's happening in India. The acceleration and use of the digital world is enormous amongst Indians. Look at these numbers. This is how people are using all this. Next. India stack is taking off. There's a J curve, right? Many of you have seen the valuation go up like this. It's actually happening with the India stack. Next. And this is also happening in the India stack again. Next. The impact of the India stack for a large bank account opening down from 6 days to 1 hour. 1 hour. Aadhaar, boom. Next. 4 hours to 2 minutes for asset manager. Next. 1 day to 4 minutes for Jio. 600,000 SIM cards issued in a day. How do they do the KYC? Aadhaar. They got 135 million subscribers. 35 GB of data used unlimited per Indian. It's unbelievable what has happened. If you give unlimited usage to an Indian, they're going to use it. Look at the pent-up demand in this country. It's enormous. We are a country constrained by supply, not by demand. But the price points have to be lower. Next. Rise of smartphone, 350 million smartphones. Jio in the next 1 year could give 300 million more smartphones. They're tying up 65% of the world's capacity for smartphones the next 1 year. So possibly we'll have maybe 600, 700 million smartphones next 1 year itself. And hurry, your business is going to boom, man. Next. We're going from data poor to data rich in 5 years in terms of in social, in terms of payments, in terms of everything else. Businesses are digitizing. And on top of that, you put AI, ML, you can do pattern recognition, mine the data. There's going to be an explosion of innovation in this country. In the last 1 year in Bangalore, 500 startups with AI and ML have come up, all smart ones. Now, every company is using AI, ML. I don't know whether they're doing it, at least they're talking about it. But that's good news because they become basic building blocks. Next. To increase market size for 10x to 50x, the cost of business must be brought down. And that is what digitization is doing to India. Next. Credit without friction. Now you can get credit by many of these companies which are giving out money in 30 minutes. You log in, you ask for a loan, they go do a background check, give you a credit score and give you money, maybe transfer to your account. They raised $500 million nats. So they learn the art of giving away money, loaning money. They're young people, techies, they learn that when you give money, you got to get it back. But all the capital is coming from overseas. So when it comes to getting it back, there's a different story. We'll have another set of innovative companies who specialize in getting it back. But this is happening. Next. New age platforms are coming up. You know this. All the aggregators are coming up in a very big, substantial way. Next. Jobs. How will jobs come? Jobs are coming by aggregators too, because we need jobs at the bottom of the pyramid, middle, and the top. And we're seeing service providers are providing huge amount of jobs. Next. So Uber is a digitizing ecosystem. All the new drivers that come is 1.5 million. Yes, there's some pain because they stopped giving subsidies and all that, but I'm sure this will set in forth new engines of growth. But the key thing is consumers and providers of services are getting linked together in a seamless manner. And that itself is leading to an explosion of jobs, explosion of money going to large number of underemployed people. Next. Now jobs. We see it with the Procter, we're seeing with Uber, we're seeing with Flipkart, we're seeing with Paytm, large number of merchants and others coming into the formal system. You must give a slide, Hari. I'll put your data too next. Next. Accelerating change. All this is accelerating change, improving the pace of change, the velocity of change. And this change is itself create new impetus for growth and make India much more efficient. Our supply chain costs are 14% of GDP, China is 6, America is 5. If we bring down supply chain to 7% of GDP by GST, the creation of national market because of GST, I think India will be there. Next. So, there are millions of experiments, thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs, thousands of techies, young people, all going forward to make India a $10 trillion economy by 2030. Next. So India is optimizing to empower problem solvers, and startups will be the force multiplier. They're the young entrepreneurs, the new age people who are going to make India a $10 trillion economy, and it's going to happen because of people in this room. Thank you very much.